It's January 1st, 1892, in Havana, Cuba. Two titans of the 19th century chess prepare to battle once more. One side is a Wilhelm Steinitz, the reigning world champion, known for revolutionizing the game with his bold new ideas of positional play. A man some called arrogant, but many called a genius. And on the other hand, there is Mikhail Chigorin, Russia's greatest hope, romantic, aggressive, unpredictable, a fierce challenger who came heartbreakingly close to the title just 3 years before this match. Now, they have met again in a city soaked in a sun and attention. Inside the Grand Hall of Centro Orstiano, history is about to be written. This is not just a chess match, it's a clash of two ideologies. Stein's scientific method versus Chigorin's shaw-buckling intuitions. In this series, we will dive deep into the epic 1892 World Championship rematch game by game, starting with the first explosive game, where Chigorin stuns the world with daring Ivan's gambit. Let's step into the past and onto the board. So, Chigorin with the white pieces played e4 and e5 by Steinitz, and we have the Ivan's gambit as pointed out. So bishop c4, bishop c5 and pawn to b4 by Chigorin, and accepted variation of the Ivan's gambit. This has all been played between Chigorin from his 3 years prior World Championship match against none other than Wilhelm Steinitz. So let's see how it continues. And here, instead of queen to f6, which Steinitz was frequently using against Gunsberg, here Steinitz played pawn to d6, which is much safer option. And let's see how it continues. So d4 is also a natural move, of course, and bishop to g4 by Steinitz, a best move recommended by the engine so far, and bishop to b5, pinning the knight. So Steinitz had to take on d5, d4 and play bishop to d7 because you have to break this pin. Otherwise, sorry about that. Otherwise, d5 was a huge threat. And many moves are possible here. Bishop to b2, I really like this move by Chigorin. Just putting the bishop on the long diagonal. You're not really threatening much. I mean, d5 is certainly a threat, but it's not like it's a winning threat right now. And also you have the pawns in the center. So in the long term, you're just down one pawn and you have the amazing development. So you don't have to, rush in with your attack. So bishop to b2 was really nice move. And already here Steinitz played knight c2 e7, and it was in this position after this move that this position was never repeated again. And for a good reason, because this is not a strong move by Steinitz. A better move perhaps would have been knight f6 when the game continues, like knight to a3, and you rather not capture the pawn on e4 and just castles. And well, knight c4 and stuff like that. So white will gain as bishop pair after bishop b6, let's say takes and bishop to d3. Playing for e5, and when this bishops open up, it will be a great attack. All in all, a good compensation for white. But after knight c to e7, here you are wasting a lot of time. Your knight is still on the original square, so you are not castling at least for next two moves. And Chigorin took advantage of it. First, he took on d7, check, queen takes d7, and he plays a very beautiful move, knight to a3. You may think that knight to d2 is the same thing, going to c4, but it gives an opportunity for black to exchange this dark square bishop, which is actually a liability in black's position. And after, let's say, queen takes d2, this position, of course, is slightly better for white still, but I mean, it's not as good as knight to a3. Because what you are arguing is this bishop on a5 will give you a tempo after knight to c4. So that's a good thing, right? Okay, Steinitz played knight to h6. If you play knight to f6, then pawn to e5 is very strong. That's why knight to h6. So pawn to e5 does not come with an attack on the knight. And simply knight to c4, attacking the bishop. There's not much you can do. You have to play the bishop back to b6. And a very nice move by Chigorin, pawn to a4, with a very direct threat of pawn to a5, trapping the bishop. So you cannot just castle right now. So you have to move a pawn to defend the bishop. Now, there are two moves possible, c6 and a6. If you are a very positional player, then pause the video here and try to find which move is better in this position while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, those who don't want to pause the video, well, the move which is better in this position is a6. c6 was played in the game, and c6 is much more natural in my eyes, but it is not a good move. So why not? Let's see. First I will show you what will happen after a6. The idea is knight into b6, c into b6, and let's see queen to b3 attacking the pawn, knight to c8 defends the pawn, and for example d5 opening up this bishop now, threatening bishop g7. You have to castle now, and h3 simply controlling this knight, and you can see that black's knights are extremely poorly placed, and that gives white a very good compensation for a pawn, and also white has the advantage now. But this is the best you can hope for in this position. After pawn to a4, this is extremely precise play by white so far. So in our game, c6 was played. And why c6 is bad? So pause the video here again and try to find what Mikhail Chigorin played, which gives him a winning advantage, while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, those who find pawn to e5, congratulations. You have just created a beautiful outpost for your knight on d6 square. And I mean, there is nothing much you can do here. Yeah, in the game d5 was played, but if you capture the pawn on e5, then I mean you can capture it back with the either knight, and that also gives white an advantage. But simply d takes e5, because even after the queen trade, let's say queen takes d1, rook a takes d1, it's still very problematic for black. Knight to d6 is landing with the check, winning the pawn on b7, which is a key pawn in the position. So let's say you castles and rook to d7. Pawn to a5 is coming up next. Rook into e7 is a threat, rook into b7 is a threat, and with that white is just superior. You can already see white's coordination is beautiful, and white is definitely better here. So after e5, d5 by Mikhail Steinitz, and knight to d6 check, of course. Knight goes to the beautiful square, king to f8, and bishop to a3. Just putting the bishop on the potential open diagonal to the king, and it's just a good strategy to follow in such positions. Okay, so king to g8. So getting out of this diagonal, because I mean bishop may open one day, right? So pause the video here again and try to find the simplest move which gives Mikhail Chigorin a huge advantage in this position. Okay, the move is actually very simple, and very simple moves are often the moves which we miss in our game, right? The move is simply rook to b1. Looks like it doesn't do anything, right? But it's actually pressuring the pawn on b7, because pawn to a5 is a definite threat now, with this knight nicely attacking the b7 as well. And once the rook lands on b7, let's say you play whatever, let's say you play pawn to g6, a5, bishop a5 and rook c7. This is catastrophe for black. Now the rook is already attacking queen and pawn, and let's say this pawn also, knight g5 will join in, this queen will join in, and this bishop is already joined in. So it's total devastation. This just goes on to show how the simple move can work out so well. But in our game, after rook to b1, Steinitz found, well, knight h to f5. Perhaps a better move would have been knight to c8 here, but I mean a5, knight into d6, e into d6, bishop into a5, and let's say knight to e5. And I mean that's it. Queen c8, then queen to h5 or d7, and white is crushing. Your king is just too weak, and I mean like the simplest rook to b3 and rook to g3 would have won. Okay. So knight h2 f5 played by black. And here a5 is a simple move which you can play. Alaska pointed it out. After rook b7 takes, rook takes b7, it is winning for white. But Chigorin found the best move in this position, which is a very elegant move. Knight into f7. I didn't ask to pause the video because this is not necessary. Pawn to a5 was even stronger. But okay, king takes f7, pawn to e6 check. Now if you take with the queen, then queen knight g5 check wins the queen. So here you have to take back with the king and knight to e5. Now you have to move the queen, so queen to c8. And well, simply rook to e1. Sacrifice the knight and just playing like nothing happened, because I mean you cannot really go back with your king, right? And putting the rook in front of the king is always a good thing. Now king to f6 played, because you have to get out of the e file. And a very nice move by Chigorin, queen to h5, threatening queen to f7 mate, knight to g4 mate. And basically there is only one move which defends from black side, which is g6. And here, pause the video, again, try to find the best move played by Mikhail Chigorin in this position while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, the move in question is simple but elegant, bishop into e7 check. Congratulations to everyone who found this move. Point being, if you take with the king which was played in the game, then the king gets in the e file and there is some discovery. And if you take back with the knight, then after queen to h4 check, x-raying the knight, so you have to play g5 and let's say knight to g5 check, king to f7 and queen takes g5, threatening rook into e7, queen to f6, knight to h6. There are too many threats. You cannot defend against it. It is very much reasonable now. So after bishop takes e7, king takes e7 was played. And I mean, you have the king under the discovery. So of course, knight into g6 check opens up the discovery, threatens the rook as well. It's a check. It's a double check. So you have to move the king. King goes back to f6. And simply knight takes h8, threatening queen to f7. So you have to capture that knight as well. And I mean, if you capture the knight, then rook to e5 is winning actually. And the game, bishop takes d4 was played. Here you could play queen to f7, which is completely winning. It's a matter of preference how you want to win this position. And Chigorin was an artist. He liked to play his games like an artist. So he played this beautiful rook to b3, simply getting the last piece into the attack, putting it on f3 or g3, and that will be game over. You cannot really defend against it. Steinitz played queen to d7, stopping queen to f7 now. But I mean, rook to f3 was coming anyways. And now he played rook takes h8 and pause the video for the last time. Find the winning move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, well, the knight is pinned and you rather like to open the remove this knight, so pawn to g4. Congratulations to everyone who just found this move. It's quite a logical move, attacking the knight, and knight cannot really move, it's pinned. But Steinitz found this rook to g8. I mean, it's a move you can play it, because the idea being, if you play rook takes f5, then king g7 and well, king runs to h8, and somehow you're kind of surviving here. It's still waiting for white, of course, but you can hope for something. But after rook to g8, Chigorin didn't allow king to g7 and he played queen to h6 check. A beautiful move again. Now, if you go back to f7, then queen s7 check, and then I exchange the queens. And if you go to, well, you have to defend with rook to g6. This is what played in the game. And here Chigorin just plays rook into f5. And it was in this position at move number 31 that the world champion Wilhelm Steinitz resigned the game. And the first game of the world championship match of 1892 went to Mr. Chigorin. So yeah, I mean here you resign because if you go back, well you cannot. If you take with the queen, that's your only move. Then after queen to f8 check, yeah, I just wins your queen back, and that's it. That's just it. That's resigns. King g5 here. You will get checkmated soon enough. But if you like, you can allow white to checkmate you directly. So yeah, that's the first game of World Championship game which was played in Havana 1892, and what a start of the game for Mr. Chigorin. Winning the very first match against world champion as a challenger gives him a big lead as psychology. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you really like this game, you like this video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.